Hello everyone and welcome to another video where today I will be going through every single thing that we've discovered that's wrong with the Sholef V1 in War Thunder, since now people will probably be getting close to unlocking it in the Battle Pass. I figured I should cover everything wrong with it, that has been wrong with it and has been fixed, and that is still not being fixed. All the historical inaccuracies with it that we know of, and the sources for what they should be. So, without further ado, thank you if you make it to the end of the video. Links to my Discord server and the Shirion Archive Discord server, which is an Israeli military vehicle research Discord server, will be linked down below. So, enjoy the video. So first off, this here is the Sholef, or as it should be known, the Sholef V1, since there were two versions of the Sholef made in real life. One was called the Sholef V1 and the other the V2, and they do not have as many differences as some people believe. The V2 had an additional ladder on the side and some other aesthetic changes. I believe it had another difference, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But none of the advanced features that the V1 has were only on the V2. They were on both models, which I'll get to later in the video. As you can see though, it's at 7.3 battle rating at rank 4. And 7.3, that is 2 BRs lower than the Vidar, even though the Sholef V1 should be significantly better than the Vidar if it was implemented correctly. But somehow Gaijin managed to implement the Sholef V1 even worse and with even more problems than they did with the Namur RCWS 30, which I have previously made a video on where I go through most of the problems that the Namur had and has. But here, with the Sholef, it has even more, which I never fail to be impressed by the problems that Gaijin can stuff into a singular Israeli vehicle each time a new one comes out. It's truly insane. But on the Shirion Archive Discord server, which I mentioned briefly in the intro, some members around the time of the Sholef coming to the game went on mass research expeditions, you could say, to museums, to documents, to websites, all of the sort, to gather as much information possible on the Sholef to compile bug reports for the vehicle. And many of these bug reports have been made, some of which have not actually, been acknowledged by Gaijin, some have been refused. Some have actually been added to the Sholef, so it is in a slightly better state now, technically, than when its files were first put into the game's clients. There it was in a complete state, and it still is, but in an even worse state, I should say. And now I'm going to alt-tab into the Shirion Archive Discord server, where there is a list that has been made of all bug reports that have been made, and probably will be made, including which have been acknowledged, which haven't, etc., which was made by a member called Setikron, and he and I were going back and forth, changing things as it went along, so I was updating it up until its most recent rendition, which was at the 26th of the 7th this year at 9 PM AEST, which is the last update. Nothing, as far as I know, has changed, so nothing in the acknowledged as suggestion has become acknowledged, nothing from acknowledged has been fixed since then. But we will be going through this list here, and I'll get to the still to come section in a bit. But we're going to be going through all this, and I'll be showing you all the problems that it has. So first off, in the fixed section, it was originally missing 6 charges, which are, if you have a look here, these here. It was missing 6 of them, but such a simple thing like that actually did get fixed. Incredible, they fixed the simplest issue with the vehicle. Here you can see the other charges section here that is in the vehicle. And as you can see in this photo, it's showing the ammo and the charges and showing how many are missing. Let's mention there are also charges in the back here, and there was 6 missing throughout this vehicle here. The Sholef V1 also originally had the incorrect engine power. However, that has since been fixed, as you can see by the label here. It was modeled as having a 752 horsepower engine, However, now it has been fixed and has a 796 horsepower engine. The Sholef V1 also had an incorrect top speed, which has thankfully been fixed. It was originally, I believe, slower than the Merkava Mark II, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But now the top speed is much better. It's at 54 kilometers per hour. And now we get here into the acknowledged category of the list, where we have the Sholef V1 has an incorrect ready size rack. See, ammunition feed allows for continuous firing of 75 rounds, and it includes sources that unfortunately you cannot see and only Gaijin can see. However, it's essentially just saying that the ready rack, so if you were to test drive the vehicle, as you can see, it has a ready rack of 60, as it shows on the side, meaning you can fire 60 rounds of ammo before the reload becomes worse. However, even with whatever sources that were provided that we can't see, it has not been fixed, merely acknowledged. So as you can see, it should be 75, while at the moment it is only 60. This bug report here is referring to the weight of the Sholef V1, as it is the same weight of the Sholef V1 is currently 60 tons, as stated. However, the museum housing the actual Sholef V1 has said that it should be 45 tons, which means this is going to greatly affect the speed of the vehicle, a 60-ton tank, as you can see, versus a 45-ton vehicle, which, you know, doesn't make a lot of sense that this whole thing would weigh 60 tons when this is based upon the early Merkava models, Mark 1, Mark 2, instead of the later Mark 4s, which are 64 tons. And as you can see, the armor of the turret of the Sholef V1 isn't exactly that great, so the fact that it's built upon a Mark 1 hull, and yet it only has 4 tons less than the Mark IV, doesn't make a whole lot of sense since the turret isn't particularly armored. And now here has to be the funniest bug report, or not the funniest bug report, rather the funniest issue with the Sholef V1, which is that the road wheels are incorrect, the front road wheels specifically. As you can see in the images here, this front road wheel should have these small little holes in it. However, the road wheel does not in fact have these small little holes in it. It's simply a copy and paste of all the other road wheels, while it should have these little notches in it, which is a small, very minor problem, but it's one that I think is quite amusing that they didn't notice something like that and they simply copy and pasted the road wheels. I think it's pretty funny, and unlike some of the other bug reports, is a bit less serious, although it's still an issue with the Sholef. It's probably one of the simplest things to fix. It's like just cutting some little holes in the road wheels, and yet it still hasn't been fixed and is sitting around in acknowledged state. The following problem is that the right MG arm is inside of the protective metal cover so that the MG doesn't swing and hit the gun sight while it should be outside of it. And that is referring to the right MG here, which clips into parts of the vehicle when it rotates, which is yet another minor issue, but it's quite a funny one, you could say, because it's so random and strange, unlike some other issues like the fact that it is a absolute chonker and weighs significantly more tons than it should. Following this, speaking of armor like we did before, here, as it says, the Sholef V1 uses the hull of the Merkava Mark 1. Its internal armor should be the same, however on the Sholef model it is missing 30mm of thickness, apart from the one between the fuel tank and engine, which is missing 5mm. The sources indicate that the existing Mark 1 hull was used for the vehicle and that any modifications may have been applied to it are related to the turret development, such as the turret drive. And this here is referring to the fact that these armor plates here, as you can see, in front of the fuel tank is 5mm, then the next one is also 5mm, as is this little plate here, 5mm, 5mm. On the Merkava Mark 1, however, it has 10mm here, it has 35mm here, 35mm here, and 35mm here, which means that the Sholef has, for some strange reason, significantly less armor in between the modules, which is a very strange problem and shouldn't be difficult to fix, and yet it remains unfixed. And here we get into some other parts, which is the Sholef V1 has the incorrect reload speed. And you see, this has to be one of the biggest issues with the Sholef, and there's a few issues here that we'll get to that are also just as large. But this is, in my opinion, one of the largest issues, because as you can see in the game, it has an 11.9 second reloading rate, despite having this very fancy autoloader, as you can see here. But 11.9 seconds? Really? The actual reload rate of the Sholef is going to be about 6.7 seconds, or 9 rounds per minute. So 6.7 seconds versus 11.9. Now, once again, this is Gaijin saying, oh, the reload is a balancing factor. Except the vehicle is already missing so many other major things with it that I'll spoil ahead. Missing laser rangefinder, missing stabilizer, its most famous feature, missing thermals, and more. And yet they say it's a balancing feature, even though the vehicle is already missing many features. It's the same issue with what the Merkava Mark IV's reload used to be, where they said that it's a balancing method to make the reload significantly worse. Thankfully, they went and fixed that after long enough. However, at the moment, I don't believe this will happen to the Sholef, because this suggestion here is sitting around as acknowledged for a while now. Now, as you can see here, this is some footage of the Sholef V1 firing, and you can count how long it takes for it to reload here. So this is a, quite frankly, very obvious source for how the reload should be, and you can tell it isn't sped up because of the way the smoke moves. So I will simply play the footage here. And here you have it. Yeah, so the reload in-game is very, very wrong. Let's simply compare it to how long it takes to reload in the test drive here. So if I were to fire a show at, I don't know, let's say this IT1 here. Let's see how long it takes to reload. Still going. Would have reloaded by now, but nope, it's still going. And only now has it reloaded. Which is pretty rough, and is a huge reason why the vehicle is, from what we've seen from other content creators who have gotten the vehicle early, it isn't exactly great, and an 11.9 second reload doesn't help it. Another issue with the Sholef, can you imagine we're still going? Yes, we are. Is that the gun is simply incorrect. This model of gun is the wrong kind of gun. I'll just read what Cade here reported. The in-game model was indeed modeled with a late version, as can be proven by the late device over the gun. This is the early version, and this is the late version. As you can see, there is a difference here in the shape of the gun covering. The Sholef V2 is from 1986, proving that the picture was at least after 1986, even if you do not trust the date of 2001, which still proves the model in-game is based on the later model after 1986, and so the gun can't be the L39 like the tech moderator claims, which is what it's modeled with in-game, the 155mm Sultam M839. The gun does not match the Sultam M839P either. This is the Sultam model 839P155. It does match a fair bit more with the Sultam M845P, which is this gun pictured here. If the Sholef V1 was at some point armed with an L/39 gun, which no evidence supports this claim, it does not matter, as the in-game model shows the later version, which had the L45 gun. So the gun of the Sholef V1 is from a later model, not the actual V1, which doesn't make any sense at all, does it? You can also, just by essentially looking at the side profile of the Sholef, that the gun appears to be a bit too short. Now, I can't bring out a ruler here and measure it, however, the gun is not quite as long, as you can see based on the fact that this little beam here is stretched out more here. Another issue with the gun that has been modeled on the vehicle in-game. Now we get into bug reports labeled as open, meaning, or not applied, meaning pretty much no moderators have looked at it, it hasn't been forwarded to the devs at all, and it's showing that when viewing or test driving the Israeli howitzer, the gun flap don't move. The gun flap don't move. Alright. There's a visual bug on the turret where the gun flap overlaps the shroud. We'll have a look at the images here. As you can see, the gun barrel clips through the gun flap, which is this here, not the main gun itself. Now, we should be able to see that if we test drive the vehicle. So as you can see here, there's a hole, but if I raise the gun, it overlaps with it. You see that? We keep going. Keep in mind, this thing can point really high up. As you can see here, you can see that it is overlapping here. If I were to move the gun down, now look, it stops overlapping with this part, which is yet another silly visual bug with the Sholef. Alright, now moving on. And now we get into the truly preposterous category, where they put a label, not a bug, on some of the most important missing features of the Sholef. Here we can see that it is missing a stabilizer, which is, if you do any research on the Sholef online, you'll know that the stabilizer is the most famous feature of the Sholef, because it's the only self-propelled artillery piece that was ever given a stabilizer, and it should have been a, I believe, 2-plane stabilizer, which would have meant no more wonky gun. However, it does not have a stabilizer. You can hover over the cannon breech, and it does not tell you that it is stabilized. And the reason that they refused it, the reason that they labeled it not a bug, is the worst part of it. Now, as you can see here, and as you can see, there are many sources about the stabilizer in real life. And now keep in mind, I will be posting all the links to these bug reports in the description of this video. So, if you want to see all these sources for yourself, then feel free to go down into the description and just go from there, and you can do your own research on it. My rambling is immense today, and I don't think I'm really getting through this as efficiently as possible, so if you want to do it yourself, then that's fine. But yet, here we see the all too famous Trickster, one of the forum mod, or bug report mods, who is quite famous for shutting down any bug reports that is not about Russian vehicles, essentially, and referring to them as not a bug, closing them, and then they will never get fixed again. And here you can see the part of his reason for dismissing it, and keep in mind there's plenty of sources here that aren't just third party, etc. Firing on the move doesn't necessarily mean that a gun is stabilized. And now here, where is the stated they can fire on the move? You see it? This is another mentioning the capability of firing on the move. And so if firing on the move and hitting targets accurately while it has a stabilizer, because obviously any vehicle can fire on the move. Articles would not refer to it as firing on the move unless that meant it could fire on the move and hit its target. Yet, according to Trickster, that does not necessarily mean the tank is stabilized. I suppose the gunner is just very good at his job. Yeah, you can pause the video and read this here. There's one of the sources about the stabilizer. There's also a YouTube link from the museum that states that it can fire directly on the move, which implies stabilizer. And here is another website that mentions that it is capable to fire on the move, so you can check that out if you want, as I mentioned. But apparently all of this is not good enough for Trickster, and so he shut down the bug report, labeled it not a bug, and now it will never get fixed again, even though the stabilizer is the Sholef's most famous in real life feature, and would set it apart from all other SPGs in War Thunder, or other self-propelled artillery pieces, I suppose. So, oh well then. I guess it's completely Sholef over. But wait! There's more! Because there are still more to come, because we still need more, like we already have some sources, but we need more sources for all these things before we can compile bug reports. Because we need as many as possible. So if you know any that maybe we don't already have, or just want to check if we do have them, do pop onto the Shiron Archive Discord server, which I've linked in the description, and share those sources with us, because who knows, they might be the key to actually fixing at least one element of the Sholef. But here, I'll go over still to come missing stabilizer, needing better sources, which is essentially referring to the fact that we're going to need to write a second bug report that just has simply significantly better sources, since the others just weren't good enough, and so that's what this category is for. Then there's the fact that it's missing the laser rangefinder, which we know it has had. We have heard that it has. Many sources dictate that it has a laser rangefinder. There's also this little box here on the turret. What does that look like to you? Does that perhaps look like a laser rangefinder? It does to me. On the turret, some people have said that it may be a radar. However, having the radar positioned behind a gun like this, wouldn't work the greatest, perhaps. So it's significantly more likely that it's a laser rangefinder, because this is exactly where you'd want a laser rangefinder to be on the vehicle like this. Also to come is that the vehicle has incorrect muzzle velocity. Now the thing is that the muzzle velocity was already changed. Originally, when the vehicle was added, the muzzle velocity of the shells was actually worse. I believe it was around 560 meters per second, while now it's 684 meters per second. In real life, though, it was most likely even faster than this, but still, it's sort of somewhere. It's half fixed, you could say. It's almost there. Gaijin almost made it accurate. They were so close, and yet they were so far. There's also the fact that the vehicle is missing thermals, which is yet another pretty famous feature of the Sholef. The fact that it was essentially an MBT-like vehicle, but for a artillery role, where it had stabilizer, where it had laser rangefinder, where it had thermals. All these things would have made it essentially an MBT with a very lightly armored turret, except it was designated for an artillery role if it were to have entered service, which it didn't. That's the fact that all of these things are missing from the game. All the things that make the Sholef most famous. So instead you have, as Gaijin referred to it as in their original dev blog, a worse M109. One of the most advanced SPGs ever created for its time, with all these fancy tech parts that had never been done before on an self-propelled artillery piece. All of that removed, and now is a worse M109, as put it by Gaijin. A worse M109 that's a higher BR, mind you. So, Gaijin's really contradicting themselves there. But people have done some theorizing on why it's so botched, other than the fact that the Gaijin team cannot do research for the life of them, but that maybe they could not make this vehicle a Battle Pass vehicle if they had given it the BR that it would most likely have had if, say, none of these bug reports had to have been made. Because imagine this vehicle with better muzzle velocity, a stabilizer, laser rangefinder, and thermals. Oh, and not even mentioning another part that was separate and wasn't on that list there, I don't believe, was the fact that in real life, this vehicle has the incorrect turret traverse. The fact that the Sholef is supposed to have a 62 degrees per second electric turret traverse, instead only having a 6.5 degree per second turret traverse. That is a colossal difference. Having a 62 degrees per second turret traverse is blitz speed, and I have not seen the documentation for this one myself, or footage of it. It seems to me like a unrealistically high number, frankly. However, I see no reason why something like that would need to be faked, per se, because it's a howitzer vehicle. Turret traverse doesn't matter so much anyway, so what would the point be to say, oh yes, our SPG can rotate its turret very quickly. Oh, be very scared. It doesn't make any sense. Except it's known for a fact that it had an electric turret drive, which means it should be faster than what it is anyway. Whether it's 62 degrees per second fast, I'm not sure. However, only a 6.5 degrees per second traverse for such a light turret is it's yet another rough part of the vehicle. But with all these things combined, the vehicle would most likely be a significantly higher BR than even the Vidar, which is 8.0. Granted, I believe the Vidar should be about 8.7, and if the Vidar is 8.7, this thing could probably be 9.3 or 9.0, if not simply 8.7, say the Vidar were to stay where it is. So an 8.7 to 9.3 BR vehicle is what the Sholef V1 should be, if it had all the features that it could. But they can't add a 9.3 BR vehicle to the Battle Pass because that is too high a BR, and would be significantly higher than the BR 4 to 5 range that they usually make Battle Pass vehicles. And they just need it to be BR4 so they can make a Battle Pass vehicle, which is why I believe they may have artificially nerfed the vehicle to suit this purpose. which is why they've refused the bug reports on, say, the stabilizer, which by itself would necessitate an increase to probably 8.0. Now, for some other Sholef footage that we can have a look at, here's some footage of the Sholef driving around. As you can see, it's most likely not going its top speed. However, here is just some additional footage that I thought I should probably show off, since it's something we've had tracked down. You can see footage of it firing. The show impacting. And now here's some footage of the Sholef zooming along. A slow-mo video of it firing. And that is all from here. Here's some footage of the inside of it as the autoloader spins and loads the shells. You could see some of this footage in the other video of it reloading that I had showed off earlier. However, here's it from a different angle, as you can see, and also gives you an idea of the reload speed. And so, some final words in the Sholef. Just some personal opinions here, since we're done with having a look at the list that was compiled in Shiryon Archive. I am just simply... And now, I know the Sholef is old news by this point. It arrived into the game quite a while ago now, about a month ago, in fact. However, seeing as I have made the Namur video, I believed I should probably make one on the Sholef as well. And... just the fact that I managed to get even more wrong with the Sholef than with the Namur after I had already made the video on the Namur. And now something you may have noticed, I do not know as much about the Sholef as I do the Namur, and so I was using that list that I had as more of a script for this video than what I was just rambling on about in the Namur video. So I hope it wasn't too random here and I wasn't moving too fast. But I was trying to get through this as quickly as possible because otherwise this video is going to be 2 hours long. I just hope whichever vehicle they add next to the game, whether that be, as an Israeli vehicle they add next to the game, whether that be a Sholef V2, whether it be a Namur IFV, whether it be the Aitan IFV, whether it be the Pere, whichever thing that it is that they add next, if it has even more problems with it than the Sholef had, I am not even going to be surprised by that point. I'd be more surprised if it came to the game without more than 5 big problems. I don't have very high expectations of Gaijin, yet somehow they still manage to disappoint beyond belief. It's really impressive. And like, once again, just like what happened with the Namur RCWS 30, which in game they just called the Namur 30, even though all 3 Namur IFV variants that exist are all armed with a 30mm gun, but no, the RCWS turret one that was added to the game became referred to as the Namur 30, which doesn't make sense at all. The Sholef here, anyway, like I was saying, it's simply called the Sholef, even though there's the Sholef V1 and the Sholef V2. So what happens when they add the Sholef V2? Is this going to stay named the Sholef and the other will just be Sholef V2? Or will this be changed to Sholef V1 and the other Sholef V2? Or are they going to simply be 2 vehicles in the game, both labeled Sholef? And when they add the Sholef V2, are they then going to add the stabilizer, thermals, etc. to it? And not give it to the Sholef V1, even though they're almost identical except exterior parts? Is that what's going to happen? And that could happen. Either way, having at least one Sholef that isn't a complete steaming pile of burning garbage would be splendid. However, the fact that they can't even get this one right... Why is the Namur in the background so muddy? The fact that they can't even get this right is sad. The fact that its most famous features in real life were left out. The stabilizer, the laser rangefinder, the thermals, the turret traverse were left out. It's mind-boggling to me. And I hope this video did a good job of at least enlightening you to the existence of that list so that you can check it out yourself. It's in a pinned comment in the general chat of Shirion Archive if you want to find it, if you join the server. I'm just hoping that this video could, in a sea of videos on the Sholef that are coming out at the moment about the Sholef, various large content creators like the European Canadian who essentially said, oh, Sholef is bad, and I didn't actually explain that it could be a very good vehicle but was implemented terribly. And other videos, like, for example, Bowtime Gaming said that it was missing a lot of potential and missing a lot of features, and he actually showed an image of, albeit an earlier version of that list, so an outdated version of the list that I was showing off, that was posted by Satsukorn. He just supplied an image of that list in his video on the Sholef, which is something I wish other creators would do. So thank you, Bowtime Gaming. I've gone off topic. I hope this video can just do a bit of educating to people who don't know much about the Sholef, who maybe believe the Sholef V2 was more than just a slightly modified version of the Sholef V1, when really they were almost the same except for slight differences. If you enjoyed the video, if you learned more about the Sholef from it, feel free to like, subscribe. I'm not sure if you would want to, since this whole video has just been me rambling angrily into my microphone for like 45 minutes. I'm gonna have to edit this down so hard. Then you can also join my Discord server that's in the description alongside Shirion Archive, and we'd always love to have some more people in both of those places. So I will see you next time in whichever next video I make on whatever that is. Goodbye.
It is important to mention that we do not only have photographic evidence which shows that the Sholef V2 had a laser rangefinder. My server and I have managed to identify the laser rangefinder using photos from my collection and elsewhere that the laser rangefinder is an LOP produced mini laser Aleph, which was extensively used by Israel in both indigenous tanks and tanks intended for export, such as, and most notably, in the Nachal Oz FCS, which was installed on Shotkal Daled, Magach 6M, and both Magach 7s.